everyone. I'm Kareem Rae, your host at the One Soccer Nation podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Ryan Cardwell. Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time today. Could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Hey, Kareem. Firstly, thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to the chat. Yeah, sure. My background has been in elite football for best part of a decade, a little bit more. Um, Primarily on both the performance and the commercial side. So I've spent time with Southampton and Liverpool in recruitment departments before becoming a consultant to investors and to clubs alike, and now in the helping an analytics startup, which is a really fun journey. So, looking forward to the chat today and sharing all those experiences and hopefully providing some insight to you listeners.
Absolutely. I mean, Ryan, before we dive in, I wish I could have met you in person at SoccerX in Miami, but you were at the World Football Summit in Saudi Arabia 2024. Could you just please share a little bit of your experience of how that was for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was. It was a bit of a toss up between the two, and yeah, went to Riyadh. My first experience in Saudi. An amazing event. The interaction from the federation, the league, the government itself put on a really strong event. Great panels, some really high quality lead sort of profiles and individuals attending. So it enabled a really good sort of foundation for some good conversation. So fantastic experience, and one that actually has generated some really interesting follow-ups, which we're going through at the moment. So there are, football in the Middle East is in a great point because it's really starting from a development standpoint. So there's so much opportunity to grow and potential that actually they're really, all of them that I was speaking to are really interested in how established leagues and countries are running the football operation. So they're fortunate. They're in a great point where there's so much data source, there's so many ideas and concepts that they can just take it in like a sponge and really develop um, a league and a club and a foundation to grow to another level. So yeah, exciting to see the growth in that part of the world, and hopefully one that we can be a part of.
Absolutely. I got a chance to listen in to the conversation that you narrated down at in Saudi Arabia at the World Football Summit, which was amazing. It was around AI and scouting, and I was listening to it. It's about an 8 minute video long conversation. I was listening to it, and it was to the point that data and AI has gone down to the numbers, and it's to the point where you're able to basically look at a player based off certain numbers and stats, and then compare them to a player that has, for example, I'm not explaining it the best, but has this type of track record, and you could basically pinpoint the next player that's coming up. Maybe they're 12, 14, 16, getting ready to replace the 20-year-old or 30-year-old and be the next right back per se. I mean, you could probably obviously explain it way better than I did just now, but that's kind of the gist I got from it, is that you could just look at the numbers and say this player is the next player that's going to be the best player for this position coming up next from the academy.
Sure. Sure. It's a really interesting conversation. So, in a summary, what we're trying to do there is succession plan really effectively. Whether that's a player, whether that's back office or front office personnel as well. People in all sorts of industries will be doing this across the board, and it just so happens that in football, we're very data rich and have the ability to uh, use that data really effectively to shortlist or to perhaps research and see checkpoints and trigger points in that player's particular journey. So what we were talking about in the panel was actually the real importance of the clubs in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia developing homegrown players, not only for their own teams but also for the national team as they look as they will potentially win the World Cup bids, and that progression. So those bits are really important. And what we'll do within those numbers is work with clubs and federations to come up with their own style and their own positional profile to be able to grow that list. So um, we'll never be, and I'm certainly not one for this. I will never say that it's a sole data driven decision. I think that we're dealing with human beings, and those human beings, as all of us know, we're inherently adaptable to change and maybe distractions or whatever comes on in our personal life that happens so that we change. So we have to take lots of these contextual things into account. But what the data can do is help to streamline a real global market into something that is relatively simplified and straightforward into what you're looking for as a club, as a federation, as an organization, and enable a real strong process to follow suit. So for me, it starts the process and it is a big enabler then towards the end of the process. So it plays a huge part to play, but equally, it's not a one size fits all approach to this. So we're not just looking for that one number that everybody has. It's a real targeted approach.
Absolutely. And it was such a cool, and just the view of the, like, just the layout of the event and how they had set up certain conversations with a table and a more so of a discussion and people around watching the discussion. It was really cool how they did it. I think it was very unique, and very well put together by World Football Summit. And you inspired me to now want to narrate a conversation in person. I do a lot of podcasting on the Zoom. I've done two panels, but that's the next level for me
Yeah.
to narrate a conversation at an event. So that was inspirational to me. So that was amazing to watch. And I'll also make sure for our viewers to link the video that we're talking about in the description down below so you guys can check it out as well. With saying that, one of my favorite questions to ask, Ryan, is how did you get involved in the beautiful game?
Cool. There's a good question. So started when I was, knee high basically. So I grew up in a family which has a lot of football influence. So my granddad was an ex-player here in England and Scotland. Came down via a few different routes to a small rural town in Somerset, so which is around about 2 hours west of London, a town called Yeovil. And as I was growing up, he was on the coaching staff, so he was an assistant coach, and then he was interim manager 6 times and spanned. He was there for 46 or 47 years in total, so a huge amount of his life. And ultimately, I latched onto that from such an early age. So after school, before school, school holidays, the odd sick day maybe, but we'll gloss over that one. I was always be at that training ground, so was always in and around professional players and seeing how it worked. And ultimately, I then went into playing. Was never going to be good enough as a player, but ultimately had that drive to stay within it. And elite sport from there has always been retained in me. So um, I went away and tried actually to. I was a half sensible golfer, funny enough, and tried to make that a career path. Didn't quite work out, and then fell back into coaching. What would be in England we call it a district, but it'd be sort of your town or sort of team, really representative team in the States. Did that alongside a few other things, and ended up uh, being connected with a Southampton scout, and that that sort of networking grew. And a few months later, the phone rang and they said, "Listen, we've got a job here covering the area as a scout for the academy. Do you fancy doing it?" And yeah, 11 or so years ago, that was where it started, and the journey evolved from there. So yeah, a real, I guess, labor of love for for the game and seeing it across the globe. So yeah, always been around it, and I've never left.
How important would you say scouting is to a club?
Cool. Yeah, for me, it's always you speak to everybody, and there's some big managers, and big people in the game that will say it. Players and recruitment is the most important because a financially these days they cost so much, and there's so many financial implications for getting it wrong. B, ultimately you can do everything, but the game and the outcome is when those 11 guys or girls or enter the fray and compete. That's where the outcomes are made. So yeah, it's massive. It's a huge part, an integral part of it. From whether you're a grassroots team or you're top end of the Premier League or the MLS or anywhere else.
Understood. And you mentioned Southampton, which is a pretty well-known club. It's a huge
Mm.
club in England. Um, would you say that scouting, well, not would you say, but there's so many other things to do. You've stuck in scouting for how many years would you say you've been in scouting for?
I was doing that for around about 9 or 10 years. So yeah, I've had a good go at it.
About a decade, basically.
Yeah.
What would you say, because there's so many things that you could do in football. You could be an FIFA intermediator, coach, scout, trainer. There's so many other things that you could do in football. What is it about scouting that you've stayed in it for so long, and what advice would you share with the next generation of soccer players that, may not go pro but want to stay within soccer? I know I put it two in one, but yeah.
Yeah. I think what made me stay in it was just the variety and the impact you can have. So the the ability to, back when I started, really, I was looking at academy, so it was all about the potential. So you're trying to find something in a young person that goes, wow, you got that skill set is really, really elite. And I've been fortunate with my journey because it's been two Premier League clubs. And I'm sure we'll come on to Liverpool in a little while. But Southampton's groundwork was fantastic because it meant that we had to find something within a player that was capable of playing in the Premier League. And if it wasn't, then it would be something that hopefully they would fall back into to the game somewhere. But that level of detail was really great, and it just drove me to find things. And throughout that process, I was always then trying to find ways to how do we actually tangibly look for potential, and how do we assess it against somebody else's potential? Because I always felt that that was the thing. So you've had many studies, many academic studies around 10,000 hours, all of these types of scenarios. Finding those and researching those is really interesting because a player who was playing in a smaller environment, a smaller team with all due respect to them, lesser facilities, lesser quality of coaching, etc., and accessibility, to then a player that was playing maybe in Europe that we were scouting, who had been in a full-time education program, had 10 sessions a week. How comparing those two are really interesting because the player in Europe is probably going to be higher at this current time, but actually, what's the trajectory of the player that you put them in our environment, full-time training, elite coaches, everything provided? Can that player then make a significant jump over time? So those are the challenges that I loved and why I probably stayed in it for as long. For people that want to stay in the game, it's it's a fascinating world, and people say, "Oh my god, that's my dream job, watching football all day." And look, I've been to some amazing games. I've seen some amazing things. It was really, really great, but it is hard. It is, and your hours that you put in, you can go to a guy. Speaking to someone, to a guy the other day, traveled 7 hours there and back to watch one particular player, got injured in the warm up, didn't play.
Mm.
That's that. These things are not rare. These things are relatively common, and yeah, it's a frustration. It can be lonely, and there's lots of things. There's lots of things that are improving around the welfare and I guess the management of your football operations, whether that's scouts or analysts or anything. That is improving all the time. Yeah, it's not just the case of going to a nice game and getting a good seat and watching the best game all the time. It's a real interesting one.
Absolutely. So from Southampton, you then went
Yeah.
off. Is that right?
Sorry, say that again. To Liverpool, yeah.
From Southampton, after Southampton, you went off to Liverpool.
Yes,
So
that's correct.
how many years were you at Southampton before you went off to Liverpool?
Yeah, so sure. I was at Southampton for 7 years. So went through um, all manner of different times there. Went through a interesting journey here in the UK with Brexit. So we went from being able to go out and look for players at 16 from Europe to all of a sudden not, and how that impact was going to happen. So really interesting journey there. And then yeah, moved on to Liverpool, um, where I started then culminating my work away from the game, away from sort of the grass in terms of scouting. Um, that coincided with my journey as a consultant. So that was a really interesting time in my career. But yeah, the Liverpool journey is an amazing one, amazing football club.
So how did that opportunity come about?
Yeah. So I'd been like so many in football, you build up your network sort of concurrently through lots of different ways and methods. Um, and I'd actually, funny enough, the way it happened was quite odd. So I'd taken the decision to move away from Southampton. I'd been there for that time. There'd been some restructure, and it was the right time. And I was probably 20 minutes after leaving the training ground of saying that's my time. I had a phone call um, from the head of recruitment, the head of national recruitment at Liverpool, and said, "Look, we're doing some changes. Obviously, we obviously spent a bit of time together in Europe and things like that. We'd love for you to come on and to run the southwest of England and to help us to grow in the academy recruitment." So um, yeah, that call came really out the blue. That we hadn't really had a conversation about anything to that point, and yeah, the journey started a few months later with them, and it was the onboarding process. So I went up and had a meeting, and they sit you down in front of the Champions League trophy in the training ground, which I'm sure is a ploy when I look back at it. And it was just one of those where you think, how do you turn this opportunity down, really? Um, and yeah, that was how it started.
So what would you say was the big difference between Southampton versus Liverpool?
Yeah, um, a couple of things. One was the standard that you looked for. So at Southampton, you were looking for the top 1%, and at Liverpool, you were looking for the 1% of the 1%. It was, the amount of really good, high quality international players that weren't right for Liverpool, and that you would say no is, eh, you sort of sit back at times and think, wow, how does this work? And for me, it was perfect because um, all the way through, I was quite um, I wouldn't say harsh, but I was quite, if I pushed a player, I I was all in on it. So and I didn't push many. So I was very much along that aspect of how they work. So that was a big thing. And then just probably the level of information and detail that they went into was really good, and they really allowed you to go and build and develop your ways of working that are, within their parameters, and it was just a really great place because you always felt valued with what you did, and You certainly did at Southampton for the majority of it, and but there it was just that level of you level, and I guess the you know that you're at a big club the whole time, and that's the thing. And it was very much a case of go and thrive in it. And yeah, it was a. Uh, I've got nothing but great memories with Liverpool because it framed so much of my work to date. It now is around actually how the processes can join together to create a real high level goal. And I was very fortunate at the time. You know, they'd won the Premier League then at that time, and just seeing that journey, seeing that journey and how every staff member was around and involved, and you see Trent's evolution, you see now with like Conor Bradley coming in, the players that we then also recruited, sort of in that time, like Ben Dokes and Trey just got his debut, etc. There's so many players there that we you place on a journey, and you then see the power that core alignment from the top has, and when that is aligned from the ownership down, and you know how it works, it's a really powerful tool.
Understood. And you'd mentioned like just being in that atmosphere on how much it was able to level you up and frame your work now, and that you continue to do. Not would you say a lot of people get to experience that, or not a lot of people get to experience that type of level of standard expectations? Um, what would you say? Would you say a lot of scouts get to experience that, or no?
No, I don't think so. I think Liverpool, you know, we were a relatively small team in comparison to many in terms of the scouting team, in terms of many clubs. So we're really fortunate because they empowered us to do a lot.
Yep.
And I was, yeah, from my perspective, I don't think many have the experiences there. And also it's about how you know what you take on from what you take from these experiences, right? So it caught me at probably the best time of my life for this because I was making a change. I was bringing together two different skill sets, which I'm sure we'll come on to later. But I was bringing together two almost simultaneous career paths into one at that particular time. So I was seeking this high performance, high pressure environment and seeing how people work within it. I was looking for how does the people, 4, 5, 6 layers down from the ownership, how do they carry out the ownership vision? How is the middle management do it? And this is not things that many would necessarily look for because sometimes it was all about the player and the next game. Um, I was really, really fortunate in the sense of I could observe those things whilst being within the framework of it all. So yeah, I think it's tough to find, and equally because the uh, I guess the industry as a whole is also so fast moving and fast paced that actually have you got time to even do that? Have you got time to keep up? And it's always the next thing. It's always we always say Saturday, Tuesday, and then all of a sudden 4 games later, and it's things can look very very different. So I think if you open your eyes to it and you can see it, I think absolutely it's one that can be there. But equally, you learn just as much from maybe some of the more challenging scenarios that aren't maybe as good, because how many times have we learned, oh, I wouldn't necessarily do that. Those are also great levels.
Understood. So, how long were you at Liverpool? And then, obviously, from all your experience at Liverpool and Southampton and all your coaching and scouting, all your knowledge in football, where did it take you after Liverpool?
Yeah, sure. So my time at Liverpool, I moved into a part-time role um, within Liverpool because I wanted to build the rest of it. So I joined them and I spent 3 years with them until uh, sort of really the latter end of last year. So um, that culminated in when I was sort of bringing all this together. So whilst I was at Liverpool, I was doing some consultancy pieces for a range of different sporting organisations, not just football. I was really sport agnostic, so um, that was really exciting. And as part of that, then that's what I started to help an analytics startup in Australia at the time, and help build them some northern hemisphere presence and put some processes in place around the commercials for that side of things. So all of that really has been 3.5, 4 years to this to now of work, which has been really interesting. So that journey, was a dual journey, which has been quite an exciting journey. It's taken me through to working with some really great US investors. Now with an analytics company called RealMetric, another relatively new company to the market. And again, just working through different processes and ideas with current clubs to help them on that journey. So it's it's been a real diverse 4 years.
Yeah. And, obviously being in an environment like, Southampton and Liverpool is completely different from venturing off. And did you start up your own consultancy company, or did you join one?
Yeah. So I set one up. So I've been really fortunate over the time. I say fortunate, you you put the work in, and I grew a really strong network um, across various avenues. And you know, the start of my career has always been around sales and business transformation. So it got to a point of saying, a point in my career to go, okay, what am I going to be? Right. So COVID hit, and it was okay, what does life look like for me, and what do I want from it? So it was a case of, well, there's a gap for me here. We have a CEO, and you have your chief commercial officer, and the real business operations, and then you tend to have a sporting director. Um, and that, how that looks can be very, very up and down. Or sometimes in smaller organizations, you may have a central figure, a CEO, that might sit across all of it. And my viewpoint was actually the game is evolving and changing all the time. The emphasis is not just about, from a sporting context, it's not just about recruitment or coaching or anything. You need to have the business acumen to understand why some of these decisions are in place. You look at what's happened with um, certainly here in Europe, you've had a Super League to contend with. In the Premier League now, you've got so many strict financial regulations. Obviously, MLS, you've got salary caps and different things to do. And look at how Inter Miami have done to work with outside third parties to be able to utilize some different spends to obviously bring some major players into that league. So there's so many different facets to what's going on a football pitch now, that my viewpoint was actually I could bring some of these together and really try to help on both sides. So I can speak the performance language, and I can speak the corporate business language. And actually, can I find a way to help people bridge that gap? Um, and in all honesty, Kareem, the plan wasn't to build a business out from it. The plan was to do some projects and see and understand, and hopefully to be able to find a role. But like in life, sometimes things are not linear, and you end up in this situation where you find a project and you roll on the project, and those projects just roll across. So I've been really I've been on that journey, and seeing where it ends up is pretty exciting.
Yep. And um, at a high level, could you just mention some of the services that you provide?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm working on with the startup businesses that I've done here. Obviously, I've done the full commercial sales strategy, finding ways to market, and actually just executing those as well. So real. just getting my hands dirty and getting in there and finding leads, etc. So yeah, not afraid of those aspects to go back to that. And then higher level wise, it's putting some real audit and process and strategy in place. So I've done plenty of yeah reviews and audits of departments and structures and how to do that, and then suggesting sort of what I would call as revenue diversification. So utilizing the different aspects of it, so digital, brands, socials, how to find the ways to just find different revenue streams. It's really, really important that that's the case now. We live in a globalized world. Globalization is the biggest opportunity for sports clubs if they choose to go down that route, and that's a big, big thing of mine at the moment. And then working with investors has been really great because it's a case of working with some existing ones, which may be M&A search, it may be just linking up different services, different people, and helping them then say, okay, let's help you set up what would a good club structure look like. And then the same for new investors coming in. So it's a case of, okay, do you really know what you're getting into, what types of clubs, and just aligning their principles of investment to some clubs. So that's really it's a broad, it's been fairly broad, but certainly it certainly enabled lots of conversations to take place, and it's amazing now you realise just how small the sports industry is when you start this process.
Yeah, very small. So you'd also mentioned in regards to investment, do you focus on investment opportunities only in Europe or as well as in the US?
The US is definitely a market that's a fun market to be around. So um, majority of my connections with investors, should I say, is they're either based in the US or US citizens. So um, yeah, I'm very much aligned to probably the ways of thinking around some of US sports. So it's subsidiary, secondary spend, third spend, etc. It's finding those ways to enhance the fan experience and utilize the digital market. So I find I really relate well to US based investors just on those sides of things. Um, so it's been a really fun journey. The market in the US is a really interesting one. The USL is a really interesting market. Obviously, the MLS numbers for franchises, as we know, has absolutely skyrocketed. So you've got to have some pretty deep pockets to to get involved in those. But I think the USL is with the World Cup around the corner is a really interesting one to look at. Plenty of future player trading opportunities. Obviously, there's a big real estate involvement in terms of there and how do you link communities into utilizing the stadium and those making it a 365 day arena because you see too many stadia around the world just be utilized on 20 or 30 games a season, and that's for something that's a real hub for a town or city that needs to alter and change. So big into things like that. You don't have to have a brand spanking new, shiny stadium. It can be actually sometimes you see that some of the nostalgia that a stadium can bring, you can really develop and hone reasons why to go there and to find different ways. So yeah, it's the US market is a big one. Europe obviously is where I'm based, so there's a tendency to focus on there. But yeah, it's an interesting, it's a really wide and open market pool at the moment.
100%. Yeah. I'm super bullish on USL, especially on USL Championship. And as you mentioned, the opportunity for mixed use development, these projects could be pretty big depending on how much land you have. 10 acres is minimum, but between 40 to 50 is great. And anything above that, you're building a sports district. So the real estate opportunities there, soccer as the anchor is there. And as you mentioned with, 2025, what's going on in the US is huge. 2025 FIFA World Cup, 2026, um, or sorry, 2025 FIFA Club World Cup,
Yeah.
2026 FIFA World Cup, 2028, the Olympics in LA, and then potentially 2031 a FIFA Women's World Cup. So a lot of soccer, or as you would call football, being played in America. So I think there's a few years ahead with a lot of soccer and influence that's going to be happening, and it's going to be interesting to see what the effect is. Um, in the U.S. with their 300 million population and where soccer moves up in the rankings between the NFL, NBA, whatever
Mm.
other sports before. So I think soccer's fourth right now. But in regards to what are your thoughts on, you know, with your investor pool, are they more so interested in opportunity in in the US or more so Europe?
I think I'm in a pool where the most of them that I'm working with are very much around looking to find something uh, relatively small in value, but to be able to then add layers of sophistication, professionalism, structure to build that value up. Not necessarily for short term, but in the medium to long term to then see some growth. So I think sometimes that may prohibit a franchise based in the US, but it doesn't necessarily rule it out. It's just then adds a little bit of a layer of complexity. So um, lots are looking into sort of Western Europe, so down through Portugal, Spain, Italy, um, clubs there very much in needing investment, needing structures in sort of the second, third tiers. That's a big market. Um, England is a really interesting market because everybody wants to be there. You obviously got the dream and the promised land of the Premier League and everything that that brings. Um, but the journey to that point can cost a fair bit of money to get there, as uh, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, I'm sure, will attest to. Um, where other markets are really popping up. So the Scottish market, the Irish market is a real uh, opportunity because lots of things at play with them. So I look at it in a few ways. It's how are the leagues structured? How well are things like TV deals? What's in place there? All of these within those two markets in particular need to be refreshed. So Ireland is a great one at the moment. So they have access to European competition. In fact, Shamrock Rovers are playing Chelsea next week in the final Europa League conference game. If they win tomorrow, they win their game, penultimate game tomorrow night. There's going to be a real chance that they will go straight through to the quarterfinals. Um, so access to Europe is a big thing. Also, from their perspective, the connection obviously back to the US, and the East Coast in particular, with Ireland is a big play. So it's then looking at, for me, sport tourism is definitely here and here to stay. You know, I've done it with other sports. I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. And I think sometimes here in England we have a little bit of it's a bit of a taboo subject, but I'm all for it. Like because I think it's fantastic, and it's not gonna. We're not trying to take away from the core season ticket holders, members that go every week. It's all of the things around it. So how can we look to do that? And being such a big holiday destination for both countries, I think you can really drive it. And the nice thing is with the League of Ireland is it ties directly into like the USL and the MLS leagues in terms of their time frame. So some really good synergy there.
So do you find the investors that are in your pool are more so leaning towards Europe versus the US?
Yeah, as a whole, absolutely. I think that's. where they will head, um, just because the ones that I'm working with are in that sort of market. So there's room for adding sophistication, professionalism, layers of structures, um, and able to scale some leads relatively quickly, if done correctly. So yeah, I think that's probably why they lean towards it. Um, but equally, I don't think, I think it's really interesting to see how the USL as a whole develops over time to make it a real attractive proposition. I think it's still a really attractive market for lots of people, and I hope to see that grow and develop over the years, and hopefully I can be a part of one of those to come.
Absolutely. So are the investors, are they more so just looking to deploy capital and are hands off, or are they investing in bringing in, strategic individuals, strategic partners, et cetera, to help bring the club from where it's currently at and take it to the next level?
Yeah, good question. There's a mix of both. So there's some hands-off guys that are happy um, to invest, put their management structure in, whether they know them or whether they inherit them, or a combination of everything with some open source recruitment. And then there's some that are really hands-on, that want to try and get in, who may have experience in uh, building businesses, building brands, marketing, specific areas. So there's a real dual and a real mix of people that are looking to invest in the sport, and that's really the excitement, because you have the yeah I'm leaning and discussing with all sorts around this. So I think it's a really interesting model. I think the multi-club model is one that is growing, and you will see grow certainly at a lower level. You also have your cities and your Red Bulls, etc. But there's a nice pool of other clubs that are coming in. And why is that good? Well, you can centralize so much. So you can centralize and scouting, recruitment, centralize in certain commercial functions or marketing functions, to be able to have that transition between um, continents, or really going back to what I said about globalization, to be able to make this world a smaller place, and to be able to share stories around it. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. And how do you come across most of your investors? Are they reaching out to you, word of mouth, intros?
Yeah, a mix of all the above. So I did the hard yards really, in terms of meeting and speaking to club owners. So anybody that's looking into this world, that you're going to get no's, you're going to get no responses. It's just part and parcel of what happens. And yeah, I'm a firm believer of, you sort of make your own luck, and in this sometimes. And I think the experiences that I've had at some of these clubs have enabled me to have some really good conversations with some really good people. So over that time, you utilize those networks and you build those relationships. And I think it's really important that you build credibility. It's by building the credibility, you're not going in and trying to sell them the world and saying, you've got to pay me for this and do that. It's a very much, it's been it's been a long time, to the point of then seeing some financial returns and some returns into projects. But what it has done is enabled my contact book to grow through referrals, through intros, and then word of mouth after that. So, which is where it's really helped some of the analytics startups, certainly, because I'm being sort of asked to come and say, do you know any companies or any people or this service? It can be really the most innocent of conversations, can then open up the door for somebody else. And I'm really open to that way of working, because um, you know I sort of pride myself on trying to make sure I'm maintaining every avenue to ensure I've got somebody good and reputable. Equally, I don't want to recommend. I won't be recommending anybody. It's okay if I don't know, then I won't be recommending it. It's a case of let's build that credibility, so that actually when the question comes or when the time comes, you're in a position to be able to facilitate or not. And sometimes you just got to go, do you know what? That's not my bag, and I can't help you, but I will help you find something that can.
Yeah. And let's just say, actually, I have another question. So, you know, like as of right now for our project that we're working on, like behind the scenes, I usually do it more so relationship based, trust, a little bit of
Yeah.
NDAs here and there. Um, but eventually I'd want to kind of make it more streamlined where it's kind of like, it's a section on our website where investors can access, and it's a portal where it'll have, our presentation, our financial model, all these different documents that a potential investor would want to see in regards to the opportunity of investment into club. Do you have something like that online, or is it more so conversation, and then throughout that conversation, throughout the journey, eventually, sign off on NDAs, and then present the opportunities of club opportunities, investment size, etc.
Yeah, I think I'm probably one of the first to say like my the online presence has not been great from my side. That's definitely an area that I need to improve on. So yeah, this is my first podcast. So there you go. There's a new one. One. So it's great to be here and to be honest with you. So um, yeah, things like that are definitely areas of improvement. I like the idea of having a sort of almost like a portal that you can sign in and maybe a couple of questions, a couple of screening questions to have access to it. But yeah,
Yeah.
my philosophy has always been um, let's have some conversation, let's uh, see where the pain points are, um, and really build that layer of trust and sort of just build a relationship to start with. Um, I do have sort of some packs that will go out uh, potentially if I'm being introduced to somebody, I'll then put it as a supporting doc. That's pretty high level summary on just what can be achieved, and I will always tailor that. So from what I know, from a couple of phone calls, a bit of research, then it's relatively. I always feel like you can get a good gauge on where you're likely to have the pain point conversation, whether that be on pitch or off the pitch, or in they may be actively seeking um, a new club, anything like that. There's so many things, but I will always then tailor the philosophy to that, but keeping it within sort of my skill set wheelhouse, if you like.
Yep. How many clubs do you currently have that are looking for investors or disposal?
Yeah, so club sides are interesting because I never will, I don't go, I'm not, I'm not the Deloittes or the Rothschilds or these guys. So it's a very much ad hoc sort of basis. But I've probably got three deals or three clubs that are really active in terms of some deals at the moment, which is great. So seeing that journey is great for them. There'll be others that will also, if the right investor comes along, I can reach out. I don't think, I think most owners are really open to conversation because they've got that far in the business world, right? So they know what a good deal is, and very rarely do you see a conversation turned down. So I think the way that I work in the investment side is why do you want to invest, and hopefully I can then align it to the club community, especially in Europe. It's a little bit easier to do because I know the background of the majority.
Understood. And yeah, the reason why I asked too is because I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I have a guy here that's interested in Italy, Division 3 or 4, looking at wanting to build out from the youth side and club, promotion, relegation, the opportunities there. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll have to do more offline. But yeah, so that's good to know. What would you say, coming towards the end here, what would you say is what's the criteria? Do they have to be an accredited? What's the criteria that you look for in an investor? Do they have to be an accredited investor, or do you only talk to private equity guys?
Yeah. Great question. Uh, Look, I think ultimately you just got to ask the question of there's a difference between looking, actively looking, and engaging. So, what part of the journey are you on? And what level, you know, budgets, spends are you prepared to, look, football clubs, sadly, especially in Europe, they make a loss more times than not. So, are you prepared to bankroll it if that's the case? So there's a lot of pretty hard hitting conversations straight off the bat. Um, for me, I really like working with a few MCOs. They're really really good to work with. Family office, that's a really good one because you feel like there'll be a core reason as to why they want to get involved, and you can then really drive that forward. Um, Done a little bit with the money, but not a huge amount. Um, and really open to those conversations for sure. But again, a different layer, different complexity, and I think they're probably just from the relationships historically. You got Deloitte, Rothschild. You've got a lot of big consultancy players in that field with the levels of spend they're looking at. Probably not really for me at this current moment in time. Um, not not to say that can't happen, but equally, I think it would be tough um, for a guy in little old England on his own to try and roll with that. But hey, I'm up for trying.
100%. And the last question I'll end off with, before some fun ones, is could you just take us through, for any potential investors that are watching and for myself as well, could you take us through the step-by-step process of, of a potential investor that meets your criteria, that's interested to engage, and invest into a club? What are the steps that you would take them through?
Yeah, sure. So first bit is real discovery. So let's go through and if you've invested before or not invested, okay, let's take you through this and understand um, are there certain areas that you want? What would be your legacy type of question in terms of okay, if you go in and you leave, what would be the one thing or one or two things that you want to have achieved? So very much a discovery piece. That's quite lengthy or can be, but equally it's very much uh, that's part of the fun. Like you're scoping and you're building this vision as to why. Then you're going into okay, let's do some search. So we get the we understand what budgets we've got, what level of investment we are, we minority, we're controlling, what we're looking to do here. Then we'll start to do the search. We'll start to then meet, have some introductory calls, get a feel for it, and we'll basically see if we can get a list of available clubs to be able to okay, this is the scenarios, this is what we're looking at, and then we're starting to go through some of the more detailed side. So then we're into narrowing that down. So we'll get the core principles of why we look to do that, and we can work. I work with a guy really really good at what he does there in terms of creating that list and having it weighted in accordance to the vision that we've set out. So that's a really really great way to go about it. And then once we can start to go into some of the due diligence process then. So then we're starting to frame actually, okay, this has got some potential to be a successful deal. And then we're looking at club due diligence. So we're very much around, okay, how is this going to work? Are there finances? What the finances look like? Outstanding debts, etc. Player contracts, that sort of thing. So it's pretty standard due diligence process. And then we'll go into the enhanced negotiation of okay, let's see if the finances, if what we've initially offered is withstanding and it's still a good deal. Then we'll go through that process, get out and see it, make sure that we're comfortable with what we're getting, and that journey can be as hands on or as hands off as they like. So um, sometimes from that point on, it's a really exciting moment because you've tailored it, you've got it down to a manageable size, and then you're in a great spot to hopefully go and execute on a good investment deal.
Yep. And the last one, if you don't mind me asking, what's like the minimum to maximum check size that you guys are looking for these investments?
Look, it can be anything. You can, if you're talking minority stakes, you can do it for, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But equally, it's a case of, are you looking to what do you want out of that? Is it that's for me is when you're probably better off doing some work with on your own to try and get in with others, and that's where you can try and build a consortium. That's something that we can look at. There's people in a similar position that we can sort of try to almost blind date set you up with. But equally, it's sometimes if you can get your network together to formulate that, it's a really good way. Um, and then right away up to MLS and Premier League money. We can go as far as it goes, but yeah, it can start from you probably say sort of $500,000 really would be for a really small piece of a club. That's something that could be done.
Yep. I'm actually interested to get your thoughts on this, right? So, the project that we're working on in the US,
Yeah.
and we're working on potentially launching a hotel championship team. Um, I Anytime I ever talk to anyone from Europe, I always mention, I say, look, you can't really start a club from scratch at a professional level in Europe, from my perspective and knowledge. But in the US, you can buy your way in at the Division 2 or Division 3 level and start a brand new club, right? And I think that's pretty cool, one. And two, the opportunity for real estate is there, for land, for ownership, for again starting a brand new team, new club name, new logo, and creating that whole infrastructure. So what are your thoughts on that and versus, US versus Europe investment opportunities?
I love it. Starting from scratch. It's like I said earlier in the piece with like how Saudi are now and the Middle East football is they've got some legacy there, but they're starting at an amazing standpoint because there's so many opportunities
Yeah.
from you look at how massive social media is, you look at how data rich it is from a recruitment and not just recruitment from a commercial perspective. You look at the digital reach and broadcast. It's an amazing opportunity to start from scratch. Um, and I look at that with I'm so that's why we when we've spoken offline and before this is I'm so excited for you because it's a great opportunity to build something amazing in a great part uh, of the US. So you look at that and you go that's a great blueprint, and I'd love to be able to do it. But equally, it's because of the standpoints of the leagues and the federations here, it would take an awful long time to do so. Yeah, there's probably the most the story of it here would be um, Dorking Wanderers, which is a club in London, big on YouTube and things like that. They started 20 odd years ago in like the lowest form of amateur football that they could. And now they've grown up to be, they were a professional club last year, or they still are a professional club, but just playing in non-league. So, yeah, that journey took 20 years to get to the fifth tier of English football. You can start from entry point, in a professional environment in the USL Championship, by paying the license fee. And I think it's amazing. Um, and it really comes into exactly what I work with in terms of, the diversity of revenue and all of those things. You put all of it in place because you're really building it over a project plan of many years. So it's a fantastic opportunity. And I think you'll see more coming in. It's just whether the outcomes, whether basically the USL clubs can make it cost efficient, quick enough, and for it to be a profitable piece without necessarily the real estate. I think the real estate is a big play, but can we find ways to get revenues in terms of the traditional ways, which I would say, football revenue. So the USL, and you look at this is definitely a wider piece for me now, but the US as a talent pool and going and reverting back to my old ways uh, is an amazing location for talent. So you've got so many cultures, some ethnicities. It's a phenomenal environment to go and produce high quality athletes. Um, the development cycle and structures are there. If you can get the level of coaching and the putting in players at a young age in terms of giving them exposure, there's no reason why that USL can't be a hotbed for talent and for player trading. And at that point, then everything shifts again to a more positive, to an even greater level of value on and off the pitch. And I think that's where I look at that from the outside to go, that's really cool. That's amazing potential. And yeah, like I said, it's I'm excited to get over and see just across the landscape how that's progressing because it will.
Yeah. It'd be pretty cool to see from your lens of what you can see in the US um, with your background. But with saying that, I think the next big topic, we could dive into, but we won't obviously just due to time, would probably be player transfers in regards, Europe player transfers range from 1 million to 100 million plus versus the US. Besides, leaving the MLS out the picture, looking at a USL championship standpoint, it's, only a few millions, right?
Yeah.
On growing that transfer market in the USL Championship in the US market. But yeah, I mean, we could go on and on. But with saying that, I do want to end off on some fun questions. I haven't done it in so long, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, cool. Go for it.
So let's do some rapid fire fun questions.
Yeah,
Um, not it's not
let's
going to
do
be
it.
off soccer. Okay. So what's your favorite food?
Oh, Spanish, anything Spanish because yeah, I went there last week before Saudi and it was amazing again. So anything Spanish.
Okay. Favorite artist, music artist.
Oh, great question. I'm getting married in April. My wedding song is from Elton John. So Emily, my partner, would kill me if I don't say Elton John. So Elton John, there you go.
Really, congratulations on my side. Um,
Thanks.
favorite, who's your all-time favorite soccer player or football player, I should say?
Oh, that's right. It's fine. Oh, that is a great question. I wrestle between a number. Um, it's actually I'm actually going to say for what he's done across everything, I'm going to say Bex, David Beckham,
David Beckham,
for
yeah.
what he's done for everything. Yeah, it's amazing. Probably not the best one, but for what he's done, he's probably the fave.
I understand you're talking from a player perspective then to a businessman and what he's done in
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, he's done it amazing.
Messi or Ronaldo? I feel like I know this answer, but
Do you?
you're gonna say
That's good because I wrestle this a lot.
oh no,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, I flip between. So today, um, today you're going to get Messi.
Wow. Why?
What did you think Ronaldo?
No, I thought Messi too. I had said Messi.
Okay. Yeah, I just think his longevity and just some of the things he could do was just out of this world.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was he from my time watching football, he was just a gem of a footballer.
Okay. Okay, I got some players. Iniesta or Chevy?
Iniesta.
Um, Fernando Torres or Didier Drogba?
Or Drogba. Just remember him. So it is iconic image of him in that Chelsea shirt.
Yeah. Um, Mbappe or Holland?
Haaland.
Holland. Okay. Um, let's go defense.
You've got my type of striker right there, haven't you? Really, Drogba and Haaland.
Talk about or Holland.
Yeah. Oh, uh, Haaland because he's going to break all the records.
Yeah. What about Marcelo or Danny Alves?
Danny Alves in that. Yeah, in that too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Sergio Ramos or PK?
Oh, Ramos.
Ramos. Okay.
Yeah.
Who else is there? Iker Casillas or Manuel Neuer?
Ah, Casillas. Yeah. You're
Casillas.
going back. That was it. That Galacticos team for that Real and that white strip at the Bernabeu. Oh, yeah.
And who's your? I mean, start with Spain. Who's your team in? Back in the days, Real Madrid and Barcelona used to go back at. Who are you? A Real Madrid fan or Barcelona?
The iconic one would always be Madrid for me.
Madrid, yeah.
So yeah, and I think when I was growing up, it was very that team was just so good. So vivid memories of like there's a Dan volley, Champions League on the left foot. You then had, and you also had some English players that went there as well. So over the time, so like McManaman went there to start with, and then obviously there was some before that, but this is just in my sort of memory. Owen went there, yeah, Beckham, etc. Jude over there now and stuff like that. So yeah, Madrid.
My Madrid was Cristiano Ronaldo, Benzema, Ozil,
Oh,
Kaká. I think it was those four players at a time.
yeah, yeah. It's not bad, eh?
If he was there at the same time, but that was the time that I remember with Madrid. But I was big on both, but I think I tended to lean more towards Barcelona because of the tiki taka, just the
Yeah.
pass. Oh my God. Okay, and then the last one I'll ask you is, what's your favorite? Who's your club in Europe for in the EPL?
Yeah. So, oh well, I grew up watching Yeovil, so I have to say I was a Yeovil fan, right? And they were really small team, so that was it. Um, do you know it's really hard because when I started to work in football, you follow. I just followed them, so I thought I was a Southampton guy when I worked there, and then your allegiance just shifts, and it's a really boring answer. So I'm sorry, but I was a Yeovil fan, so I'm going to stick with you. I'm going to stick with Yeovil as a small team, and yeah, I was fortunate to work for two great clubs in the EPL. So yeah, we'll go with those two.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, I'll plant some seeds before we go. I think we could discuss maybe in the future multi-club ownership. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, hopefully you could bring us some investors as well to the US. Uh, but with saying that, fingers crossed, with saying that, Ryan, I appreciate you taking time for being on the One Soccer Nation podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, Kareem. It's been great.